Welcome to In Session, the podcast focused on making therapy feel more human and more accessible. This is Between Sessions, a short segment where Associate Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist Mark Ponce highlights themes and questions that might help you think differently about your therapy and life experiences. Thank you for being here. Please enjoy today's episode.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to In Session. I'm glad you're here. We're finally at part 2 of my promised 4-part series on common communication traps in relationships. Sorry this episode took so long. If you know me in my personal life, or if you're one of my clients, because we've been talking about it a lot, me and my little family are going through some pretty significant life changes, including moving to Spokane, Washington. And maybe I'll have another episode on what that looks like as far as my therapy practice goes. But I'm so glad that I found a little bit of time through all the chaos to record this episode here, because I know that many of you have been waiting for it. And honestly, I've been sitting on it for a while. So last time we talked about defensiveness and everything there, and how when defensiveness comes up, it feels like we just can't get through to our partner. So if you haven't listened to that episode, please listen to the episode there if that comes up in your relationship, or you know of anyone who struggles with that in theirs, because I also talk about common workarounds, antidotes to slowing down the protective behavior of defensiveness. But today, what we're going to spend some time on is probably more frequent than defensive, comes up quite quickly, and can really influence and spiral our relationships into defensiveness and some of the other protective mechanisms that I'll cover in part 3 and part 4 of this series. Today, though, we are going to highlight criticism. Now, we all, I imagine, know what criticism is, so I won't have to break that down, but I do want to separate the difference between criticism and complaint, because those two are often mixed together when thought about, when really there are different things, and the way they're communicated leads to different outcomes in our relationship. Maybe we could spend some time here highlighting an example of a complaint versus criticism, and then we'll get into an antidote or some workarounds there to slow down the critical parts of us that come up during conflict, okay? So to start, a complaint can sound like, and I'm getting this example from the Gottman blog, I was scared when you were running late and didn't call me. I thought we had agreed that we would do that for each other. In the complaint, we're highlighting I was scared. That is our experience, right? And we're hoping that when our partner hears that, they're really tuning in to our emotional experience. I thought we had agreed that we would do that for each other, right? Maybe this can be perceived as criticism or even levels of contempt. But what we're attempting to do here is just tell our partner that we're not on the same page here. I thought we had agreed. Right? What I would add to the end of this example for many of my couples, they know, is can we work together? Are we able to set aside a time where we could talk about this? Where we're saying how we feel. We're talking about where we thought we were in the relationship, and then we're making active plans to do something about it, right? Which gives our partner the whole lay of the land to actually respond to us in the way we hope to be responded to. Now, criticism in this example can sound like this. You never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. I don't believe you are that forgetful. Honestly, you're just selfish. You never think of others, and you never think of me. You don't care my feelings. You. Right? We can go on. And criticism, once we start, it's so easy to cycle into that. Now, if we break this down, we see a lot of you statements and not a lot about our own experience. And how can our partner really understand the importance of this, really understand our experience, which I think we're hoping for them to do, and be there to actually want to collaborate. When we're coming with the you type of energy, nobody is going to be willing to work with us, right? In this first part, it says you never think about how your behavior is affecting other people. Do we expect our partner to respond in a way that says, oh, you know what? That is what I do. No, When I hear you never think about how your behavior is affecting other people, I'm automatically on fight mode, and most people are. And honestly, it makes sense, right? And this isn't blaming the critical partner, right? Because it's much harder to talk about I was scared rather than saying you, like keeping the focus on me or on the partner, right? So both sides make sense, and I'm not trying to go at the partners who get critical or go at the partners who get defensive, because they are protective mechanisms in some way as we're breaking down. Criticism just happens to protect us in a way that we don't have to talk about the vulnerable emotions that can be risky, but it could lead to us feeling even more and more distant. I hope you can get the difference here between complaint and criticism, because they just carry different flavors and often come with different results. Now that we've separated the two, let's talk about the different moves we can take here when we notice ourselves or our partner being critical, right? Because a skill that I like to build in my couples is not only do we want to be aware of our own defense mechanisms or our own processes, we want to be so aware of our partners that when they happen, when the criticism, the defensiveness, or the other two happen, we're going to point out, hey, I see you being critical of me, for example. I wonder if you could try again. I wonder if we could do this in a different way, because I think I'm feeling myself getting defensive or whatever it is, and this just doesn't feel productive. Sorry. So criticism, what I want us to notice is when we're too focused on the you statements, reorient that to say, you know what? I want to talk about how I'm feeling here with I statements. I statements can be seen as very cut and dry. Some people say that, I use I statements and it still doesn't get through. And maybe that's a whole nother issue we need to discuss in a different podcast episode. But to use I statements correctly, and I use the word correctly sparingly because it's different per circumstance, but often what works the best is to say, I feel, and then fill that in with emotion word. I feel unheard. I feel scared. I felt unheard. I felt scared. This is different than saying, I feel like. I try to really slow down when people say, I feel like, because once we say like, we're talking less about feelings and more about a thought. I feel like you never. I feel like when this happens, you're not thinking about me. I feel like I'm scared. Doesn't necessarily make sense when it comes to emotions. Like I see what we're trying to get at, but it's like 80% of the way. But I feel scared when you don't text me. I feel unheard when we talk about these important things. This allows our partner to actually hear and be with us, which I imagine is the intent when we're sharing our feelings with our partner, when we're sharing our complaints with the partner. Leaning into the I feel statements and trying to avoid I feel like, we're trying to avoid you always do this, leads us to actually encourage teamwork and collaboration with our partner. That way, the other person doesn't feel attacked. We're feeling like we're actually representing ourselves in an authentic way. And our relationship can actually start healing in a more productive and healthy way. So unless we really want our partner at the end of the day to feel like shit, we have to catch ourselves in our critical nature. We have to catch our partner when they're being critical of us and see if we could try again. Because if we're not doing the work to repair that, then it's going to cycle on and then end up leading to what's called contempt, which is often the worst of the 4 stuck communication behaviors. And we don't want to get there. So recap, complaining is different than criticizing. Complaining captures our own experience, what we agreed upon with our partner, and then encourages teamwork to figure out a way out. Criticism is very directed. It's very pointed at a person's character rather than focusing on the specific behaviors, and really rather than focusing on our own experience and our vulnerable feelings. And one common antidote to trying again in communicating our complaints is to use the I statements. I feel unheard. I feel scared. I felt afraid. We're avoiding I feel like because that's more of a thought, and we're avoiding the you statements, you always, you never. Now, this is a very cut and dry, quick way to address criticism. As I've mentioned in this episode so far, it is a protective mechanism. It does often help us shield away from expressing our very deep and vulnerable emotions, because I think anybody would say it's much easier to focus on another person rather than taking the risk of putting ourselves out there and then being hurt once again. So there's a lot of nuance to this. I don't speak like this is an easy thing to do. I do encourage everyone who may be experiencing criticism that gets out of hand or criticism that we feel like we can't control to go to couples therapy, either with myself, with my colleagues that you've heard on this podcast, to break down what makes criticism come up in the first place and what makes it so scary to take these risks in your relationship. Because I don't deny that there could be instances in the past where you have put yourself out there and you've been slapped on the wrist, right? And it makes so much sense that criticism would be the only way for you to be heard. And at the same time, I put these episodes in place just for you to think about how we can take different steps, whether you are the critical partner or whether you are the partner who receives the criticism. There are different steps to take. I understand the nuances of taking those steps, and I'd be happy to answer any questions via email or talk through this in a therapy setting and really slow down to figure out what's happening here to get you and your partner unstuck. So I know these episodes go by pretty quick, and I think that I'm over time on this episode, but I really enjoy talking about these. I talk about it all the time in my sessions and continue to learn more about the different flavors of all four of these. The next episode, part 3, will be highlighting stonewalling and how when that comes up, it makes talking through issues in the relationships that much more difficult. Okay. Well, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Please feel free to share it with anyone in your life who might benefit from listening. My next client just got here, so I'll see you next time on In Session.
Thanks for listening to this episode of In Session. If something resonated with you, let us know on any of our socials or directly on the podcast episode. If you want to be featured on the show, please DM us or reach out to our team at insessionpod@outlook.com. That's insessionpod@outlook.com. Please like and follow, and we'll see you on the next episode.